homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to Miles Away Farm, or welcome back. Today in the kitchen we are doing something that I have wanted to do for 12 or 13 years and have just never gotten around to it in the right window of time, which is we are going to forage some wild violets from our yard, and we're going to turn them into an alcohol infusion or a tincture, and we're also going to turn them into a wild violet syrup. And both of these can be used in cocktails for a little bit of violet flavoring. I have wild violets that randomly pop up all over my yard. My yard, this will come as a shock to some of you, is not terribly manicured. We really try to keep the invasives in check and then keep the pokey things out of the yard if we can. And then other than that, we just kind of let nature do its thing. And so every year in the spring, in mid to late March, I have all of these little purple and sometimes white wild violets pop up all over the place. And they have a very faint smell depending on how fresh they are. These guys are probably a couple of days past their ultimate prime. And I knew they were edible. I knew you could throw them in salads and things. And it's mid-March, which is usually when I'm planting a lot of my seeds for seed starting. So my tomatoes and my peppers. It's also the time of year that I have baby chicks. It's also the time of year that I start amending beds for gardening and that kind of thing. I usually have a ton of stuff going on this time of year. And the window for these is maybe a week. It's very short. And I just always miss it. And so I always see them and I think, I should do something with those. I should try playing with them. And then I never do. This is the year. So I'm excited to share with you a couple of wild violet experiments. And you can also put egg white and sugar on these and turn them into basically sugared flowers that you can use for decorating on things like cakes. That's stunningly beautiful, but also way beyond my patience level. I am not a super detail-oriented, paint egg white with a brush and dip in sugar and let dry kind of a gal. And I'm also not a big cake decorating gal. And so feel free to do that if that's your wheelhouse, but definitely not mine. But I am excited to play with this in some cocktails this summer. So wild violets, let's get started.
So this violet is known as wild violet. It's known as wood violet, sweet violet, English violet, common violet, or garden violet. It has a lot of different names. It's from Eurasia, and it's got a long reputation in Europe as something that is used somewhat medicinally and then mostly for its fragrance. And so this is the violet when you buy a perfume and it has a violent fragrance. That is where that is coming from. These are the violets that are used as not an essential oil, but an absolute in perfumes. And this plant is in the genus viola. There are 680 species of genus viola. As far as I know, they are all edible. And if you've ever grown pansies and little Johnny jump-ups, those are also edible violas. Other kind of fun, interesting things that I learned about this while I was doing some research is they're perennial, obviously. They come back year after year. And they actually evidently bloom again in the fall in a very unobtrusive way that you don't notice, and that is how they spread their seeds. And they're also able to propagate by sending out runners into the ground. These have spread over the years since we've been living here, and they will come in on nursery plants sometimes and you don't realize they're there. I'll put a couple of links below on how to identify these. So these needed a good bath, so I'm going to go ahead and put these in my salad spinner with some fresh water. I obviously have a white variety as well as a purple variety. Evidently, that's pretty common. And I'm just going to give them a good bath because they've been sitting out in the yard. And as I mentioned, mine did not have a lot of fragrance, and I don't know if that was just when I picked them or the time of year or what, but not a lot of fragrance happening here. Ideally, you want to pick things like this after the dew has burned off of the plant, but early enough in the day that they're not super hot. And these have been blooming for about a week, and so I was a little late in getting to them, but giving everybody a nice quick rinse here. And then I want to dry them off as much as I can, just because if they're going to be mixed into other stuff, I don't want a lot of dilution happening there. So giving them a good spin. And I'll put links to where I got recipes for this on the internet. It's pretty straightforward. So So I'm going to do two different things. I'm going to do a wild violet simple syrup, and I'm going to do a wild violet tincture. Aren't those gorgeous? They're so pretty. So this is the syrup, and I'm doing 2 parts sugar, 1 part water, and that's going to give me about a 66% sugar solution, and that is about where you need to be in order for sugar to actually be preserving the product. And so if you're ever doing sugar syrups and you don't want it to mold, you need a high concentration of sugar in order to keep it from molding. And this is probably right on the edge of that, so I am going to keep everything refrigerated once I make it. I was using some organic sugar that was very similar to a turbinado sugar or a demerara sugar, so a little bit of molasses is still in there. So I'm not going to get a nice white or purple color here. Getting everything melted together, turning the heat off, and then I'm adding my flowers. I added 1 cup of violet flowers to this mixture, and I'm just going to let it sit until it's completely cooled, and then I poured it into a mason jar and let it sit basically for about 24 hours. And then for the tincture, I keep a big bottle of inexpensive vodka around, kind of the bottom shelf vodka for this kind of purpose. I've got about 2 cups here of violets, and I'm gonna just cover them until they are completely covered with this vodka. I could have used a better brand of vodka, and I probably would have gotten a slightly tastier product, but this inexpensive vodka does the trick. And this I'm going to leave capped and let sit, shaking once or twice a day for about a week. So I'm going to infuse this for a little while at room temperature. So I'm writing the date on there just so that I don't forget how long it's been. They look so pretty sitting there in the vodka. And the thing to know about water sugar solutions versus vodka alcohol solutions is basically plants have different essential oils that are released depending on what it's soaking in. So I'm going to be releasing a different compound with this tincture than I am with this syrup. And then I could actually put both of them back into one cocktail and I would get slightly different flavors from each. So straining off, this is the next day, straining off my simple syrup, just using a really fine mesh little strainer. I use this thing all the time. Having this little small strainer is so handy. And I'm just putting this into a flip top bottle because I happen to have a lot of them on hand. I gave this a taste and it is very subtle. I definitely think you could easily double the amount of violets that were in that in order to get a stronger flavor. And it could just be that my violets aren't that strong either. And then to this, I'm gonna add the juice of about a half a lemon, which is gonna be a couple of tablespoons of lemon juice. Again, filtering it just to make sure I'm not getting any seeds in there, putting the cap on, and then I'm gonna give that a shake just to mix that lemon juice in. And again, that lemon juice is partly for flavor, but also partly to give a little bit more of a preservative effect because it's gonna increase the acidity of this solution. But there you have it, tribe. Violet syrup and violet tincture from wild sourced violets in my yard. Give this recipe a try, what fun. Thanks for watching, Tribe. If you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me a comment, and share. I have new content coming out every week.